Well, a very good morning, good afternoon good evening to you, whomever you are, wherever you are. And I fluffed up the line at the very, very start. My name's Matt Gifford. This is Monkeh Video, and this is this first official live stream. It hasn't really got any massive structure going on. I don't want it to feel like it's a lesson or a hard and fast rule of how to do things. To be honest, I'm a remote worker. I have been for a number of years. So for me, it's kind of an experiment to see how well I can develop whilst I'm discussing what I'm doing whilst I'm developing. It's also a way to kind of feel that there's other people in the office as well. So you might be working, you might be at home, you might be in an office, you might enjoy the peace and quiet, or you might enjoy having a voice droning on in an English accent in the background. But whatever the reason, if you have tuned in, then thank you very, very much for your time. And Fatherzoid, thank you very much for the follow. It is much appreciated. And because you expressly requested it in the chat, knickers, especially for you. So the chat is open on YouTube and Twitch, so please feel free to chat if you would like to. I will be able to see those and respond accordingly. But the plan for today, really, I'd mentioned it in the introduction video a couple of days ago. 9 years ago, I wrote a Twitter Cold Fusion API wrapper called monkehTweet, and it's been very, very popular. It's used in a lot of places. It's something that has served people very, very well and still continues to work. But whenever I look at the code, because it was written 9 years ago, there are a lot of issues, a lot of places where it needs drastic modernization. It's very, very very, very code heavy, and I want to streamline it a lot. So my plan, I'm time boxing it today for about 45 minutes just to see what I can come up with, because in Cyprus at the moment it is 9:30 in the evening and I've got to get up early to do the school run tomorrow. So I'm just going to see what I can come up with. But you can see here in the repository, it's kind of messy. I mean, this was 9 years ago, written back before I really kind of understood what a README file was. So I've even got a Word document and a PDF for installation instructions, which are completely out of date now. I think the screenshots in there relate to very, very old Twitter practices. I've got a Travis file I no longer use. It has got a module config, so it can be installed in a Coldbox application. So it's had a bit of modernization. But if we actually skip through to the main files, once we scroll past the endless lines of comments, these are all the comments from the change in the revision history and everything's... You're welcome, Scott, by the way, for saying knickers. You just got a freebie. We're still going through the comments, and it's only here that we actually start with the coding, and you can see it's all horrible script. It works very well. I've seen it used in a lot of production code, but it needs a lot of work to refactor, and I know it hasn't got any implicit accessors or mutators, so we're not using the properties for getters and setters in the modern CFML engines. So you can see here I've got an auth details property, but for all of my setters I've actually handwritten those functions, and I'm assigning them to the variables instance. And I remember specifically 9 years ago thinking it would be a good idea to put them into variables.instance. I'm not quite sure why now, but obviously code has changed, languages evolve, and this bit of code needs to evolve as well. There's also one other thing that was drastically missing. I do have a test suite in there, but it was written after I'd actually written the wrapper, so I was effectively writing my tests excuse me, after the code was done. And it was so long ago that it's actually MX unit as well. So what I want to do is to change things around. So I'm going to jump over to my code editor. VS Code is my code editor of choice, and if you're not using it, I highly, highly recommend it. So I'm just going to create a features branch from that at the moment. Let's call it Scriptify from the stream. and it would help if I learn to write. So I don't want to break master at the moment. I want to keep this in a features branch until I'm ready to switch it out and do whatever I need to do with it. I'm also going to rename, because believe it or not, I'm using .old, sue me, but I want to have it as a reference. But actually the first thing I want to do is completely strip out some of the rubbish that I no longer need. So test box is going. The test directory itself is going. The box.json I need because we have that in there for the module. I mean, test box itself is not rubbish, don't get me wrong. That's not why I'm stripping it out. But what I want to do is actually get a fresh version installed. And I know an npm install would have done that for me, but I want to get that fresh. So I'm actually going to write, which is something I very, very rarely do. I'm actually writing it test case first. So I want to kind of stub out some of the basics that I'm going to need whilst I am progressing. So let's go for install test box. And by the way, as it is 9:45 at night, I cannot be held accountable for any typos because it's quite late in the evening. But if anyone has got any questions or they want to drop anything in the chat, then please do feel free to say hello. It'd be nice to have you around. All right, so I'm going to test box generate harness to actually build up the stub for me. Okay, let's do the one thing that I very, very rarely do, apart from learn to type properly. So, monkehTweet test. Okay. If you guys can see the editor okay, let me know. If you're having issues, I'll happily increase it for you. Actually, I would drop that down just for the moment. And what I want to do is I'm going to just mock up my initial suite, testbox.base spec. And to be honest, this is much of an experience, a new thing for me than it probably is for you guys. I know that a lot of us have seen gamers live streaming. I know that developers do it now. There are some people in our community that do it, and I wanted to give it a try really, to not just to hear my droning English voice, which no one really wants to hear except for Scott Strohs, because he's a lovely, lovely man, and I miss him very much. But it's more as an experiment, as I say, just to see if it helps me develop as well. I've kind of become a bit more of a mindful developer, which is something else that I might want to cover in due course. But maybe discussing things as I go and considering what I'm doing whilst I'm typing them, and actually having to talk about it might open up some avenues of thought or discussion, or it might just bore the pants off of everyone. Who knows? We'll see. But wherever you are, I hope you're well. In Cyprus at the moment, it's people seem to think that Cyprus is constantly hot all of the time, and for 2 months of the year, July and August, it is blistering. It's very, very hot, and I've been here for 3 years now, and I'm finally getting used to that particular weather. But it suddenly turns, and this week we've had a lot of rain and a lot of thunder. Yesterday we had a torrential downpour that was slanting to the left, and then it eased off after about an hour. And then we had a torrential hailstorm to the right 5 minutes later, which is great. I think we're on par to have another very wet winter, but that means we're going to have lots of grass and lots of beautiful vegetation and plant life when spring comes around. But anyway, that's where I am. So it does get very, very wet, and it also gets very cold as well. People don't think that it gets cold in winter, but the houses are built to keep the heat out during the summer, not to trap them in. But having said that, I mean, cold for us, it's a bit chilly now. It's probably about 20 degrees Celsius, which I know my friends in England will sniff at because that's the height of summer for them. But once you acclimatise, I am sweet. Thank you very much, Scott. You're a very sweet man as well. Honestly, mate, I have you are missed. I miss chatting to you and hearing your dulcet tones. So before I do anything, I want to actually make sure that my instantiated component does actually return my instantiated component. So I want variables.monkehTweets. It's times like this when I think I wish I had have named my components just single letters. Imagine the amount of typing I'd save. It'd be phenomenal. I'm quite an anal developer as well in terms of getting capitals and spacing and everything in line, so hopefully that won't annoy you too much. But readability for me is a big thing. Not only for me, but also for any poor developer that wants to look at my code afterwards. So when I instantiate it, I want it to be a component and I want it to have that particular instance. It should contain the correct methods, and this is probably a test case that we're going to be building on once I actually start adding these things in. And as much as I would love to get this built in 1 hour, it's not going to happen because there's quite a lot that actually needs to be done. The actual original component was written in the space of a weekend, those 9 years ago. It was a fun weekend getting to grips with the Twitter API, and that's basically because I saw it there and I wanted to play around with it. And for me, that's the core part of development, right? You see stuff and you have fun. Or it's all about being inquisitive. Get Memento. At the moment, I'm sticking with the old Memento route. I might look a little bit later on at getting Mementifier, one of the Coldbox components, in place. So one of my main fears for refactoring monkehTweet is because it is so widely used. Obviously, I don't want to change any of the method names too much because people have them in their application, so I don't want to put them off downloading a latest copy. I don't want to introduce any breaking changes. So ideally, I want to keep a lot of the core functionality that is exposed to the user, exposed to the developer implementing it, exactly the same. So there will be some function names that I will want to remain intact and persist for them. Obviously, that means I can change a lot of the internal stuff that they don't directly interact with, that the wrapper manages for them. I also, in part of modernizing it, I want to make it a modern scripted component. One of the reasons when I wrote it years ago, I wrote it in tag. I think it was almost pre the tag syntax, the script syntax coming out, if not on the cusp of it coming out. And I was never very confident in scripts. I always preferred tags. I wasn't a 5 tagger. I knew at least 7. So, you know, I had that going for me. But I was never very confident in script. And I just didn't want to break anything. Or there was almost that fear of having to learn the language that I loved in a completely different syntax. So, but I've kind of got to that point now. And I've got over it where I'm very, very comfortable writing script. I actually love script very, very much. So I want to introduce that, and I know by doing that I'll be able to drop down a lot of the functions that I had handwritten using the implicit getters and setters. At the moment, monkehTweet does not use any external dependencies at all. That's something that I was considering keeping, but as part of the modernisation, amazing people in our communities have written amazing tools that are going to help me. So I think it might be time to actually introduce some dependencies in there as well. So when it actually comes to releasing it, I'm going to essentially create a release tag for the existing tag-based structure as it is, so people can still access it and pull it out whenever they need to. But the up-to-date stable release is hopefully going to be the new scripted release that everyone's going to choose to use. So we shall see. Right, so I have my test suite written up at the moment. My base test suite. I do not yet have the component, so I'm just going to create the new script component, the very, very basic outline. And what I'm also going to do, clear it. Good Lord. You know you're live streaming when you type. So I want test box watch. Yeah, you watch my files, test box. You do it. Access is true. So instantly, for anyone that hasn't used accessors before, when you're writing your components, firstly, spell it properly. I'm now doubting myself that I've incorrectly spelt it. But if you use access as true, then you're instantly fine-tuning and streamlining the amount of code that you're actually in charge of. So you've reduced the number of errors that you could potentially add into the component by having the CFML engine manage it all for you. Right, so it's going to create that component. I'm not going to add any properties in yet, but I want not a pubic property. That's for the after hours show. Whew. Careful what you type, Matt. So we're going to have the public component for the instantiation. Of course, we're going to comment things. Constructor method. I'm not going to add anything into that yet. So we have our constructor method that will return that function. And why is my test box not finding that? My test box run because I haven't got a server running, of course. So the other thing I need to do, that's not going to run if I haven't got a server running. So I'll be developing primarily against Lucy 5, but obviously when it comes to testing in later stream releases, I will be testing it against the optional CFML engines, because those others are available. And of course, when it comes to testing and creating my README file, for those that don't know, I'm going to be adding in some CFML badges. So this was a fork that I made of another site for the badge.io, and they had a lot of really fantastic badges for README files, and I wanted to create a CFML specific. So at cfmlbadges.monkeyworks.com, it's a static site. I've got some examples there. You can see it's powered by CFML, compatibility ColdFusion 2018. But you can actually get a list, or you can search and filter. But we can view all of the badges that you can implement in your README file. So whether your code was approved by Ben Forter, whether it was built with Command Box or built with Resentment. I've got compatibility in there for. I'm going to need to update this very soon when Adobe released 2020 and when Lucy released version 6. I think I visited Ray Camden's Amazon wishlist, so for those old school enough to remember, we have that in there as well. And my arse is covered by Fusion Reactor. So when it comes to adding up the README file, I'll certainly be adding in the compatibility badges in there as well, so people know what I've actually tested against. And fantastic, object monkeyTweet does not exist. That's fine because I'm calling the index and I'm not interested in the index at the moment. But what I want to do is get my test box to start running. Okay, there we go. So at least it's actually found the runner. It's going to fail, certainly when it comes down to the correct methods, because I have not got those in yet. This is going to be a struct for the moment until I decide to change it. Returns a structural representation. Typey fingers of the properties contained. Oh my good lord. In terms of the actual HTTP requests that monkehTweet is going to be making as well, the original objects, I think I made kind of one all-encompassing HTTP function that kind of manages everything for me. Why is that taking so long? That's crazy. Maybe I've done something wrong there, we'll see. But if we're looking at building in the dependencies as well, I'll probably be looking to actually add hyper from Eric Peterson as well. So I'm going to have a look at that to see what we can do. I'm doing something very, very silly. Tests runner.cfm. Right, okay. That is because I have... It's the old typing issue. Problem exists between keyboard and chair. Okay, cool. So we have the errors that we would expect, except for this one. Well, the good thing is that the test BDD test actually passed, so that's nice. I'm going to take that one out just so it doesn't confuse me when I get to look to things. All right, so I've done something very, very silly here. Variables.monkehTweet, variables.monkehTweet. Typo. Silly. Always, always watch those typey fingers. So if you guys are doing anything interesting, any fun projects or applications that you're working on, feel free to drop them in the chat. It'd be quite nice to hear what you guys are working on too. I know that I've certainly had a lot on at the moment. I've got a few ideas. There's an application that I want to actually bring to the stream. So the monkehTweet refactoring, I think, is going to be set over a number of different episodes, because it's going to be an ongoing thing. There is an application that I'm also writing. I wrote for fun, very, very quickly, that allows people to send SMS messages. So companies can log in and send SMS messages to their customers when a product is ready to collect from their store. This was written literally in 10 minutes when a friend of mine who owns a shop in our village wanted something. So I knocked it up, but it has no database backend at all. And then the typical questions were asked of, it'd be nice if we could go in and change this value or store customer information. Just, the name and the number so we could access it, kind of like a phone directory. So it's suddenly grown from a very, very quick go in, type in the number, type the message, send, which works perfectly, to a slightly larger application. So that's probably going to be one thing that I'm going to be building in the stream. And I think for that as well, I actually want to make that an API-based application, actually run it with Vue.js on the front end to add a little bit of pizzazz as well. So we shall see. I really wish that my tests were working here as well. But I've clearly done something wrong there that I can't quite pinpoint at the moment. But we know at the moment Okay, so I'm getting the right methods, I'm getting stuff back. Okay, so mocking it up. I've got the right thing. Just to save my scrolling fingers as well, we'll blitz all that. Now the first thing that people want to throw in is obviously the consumer key, but when I'm doing those, I'm actually setting them as setting them into auth details. Excuse me, in auth details in the original code. Set auth details actually creates a new object, a new model. The thing with this particular model is that it's anemic. It does not do anything else apart from storing that data so that it can be called out later on. So although it would be nice to refactor that and keep that as it is, obviously drop a lot of this code down and just have it as implicit mutators and accessors. If it's an anemic model, by which I mean it's not doing anything else, it's just saving that data, then it might as well be kept as a struct. So our property name is auth details, and this is all open to change as well. The refactor might end up being refactored. So we'll set our auth details, which means we also need to update this too. So for our auth details, it's taken in the consumer key. So essentially we're asking for, okay, so when it comes to the actual property for the required, so we are going to need a required string of consumer key, and we're going to set the default. We are also going to need the consumer secret. Now, one thing that has interested me as well, I've been waiting for a while for Twitter to actually update their OAuth, because they are still on the whole using OAuth1. I have another library that I wouldn't mind adding to at some point. I've been adding a few more providers over the last couple of days, but I have an OAuth2 Cold Fusion wrapper that's on its own as a standalone. You can manage all of your OAuth2 processes for the majority of providers, but there are most of them, or a lot of them, have custom or specific requirements that they need. So I actually added one for Streamlabs the other day when I was setting up the stuff for this particular stream, and I noticed that they had OAuth2 implementation for their API, of which there is an API wrapper coming that I've got ready to release. So this kind of overrides, sends in the specific information that they need, and then sends it back to the OAuth2 parent to actually manage. Now, what I really, really would love is to write have a Twitter OAuth2 provider within that particular repository. However, yes, Twitter still seem to be using OAuth1 with, until I found out today, I'm not sure how long they've had this implemented, but they seem to have a piece of OAuth2 in there. So in terms of OAuth2, primarily you would authorize, you would grant access to the application, or you would log in your user, you would authenticate, which would then redirect back, and then you would ask that user you would request the access token and the details that you need on behalf of the user with the logged in application. So it's a very, very short, almost kind of two-way data flow. Twitter seems to be going the very long way about it, with a little bit of OAuth1 to manage the actual authentication, but then OAuth2-esque to manage receiving the access token. So I'm not sure whether I can write a full provider for it to fit in with that other repository, or if I would need to have something custom written for them. But I raised that point because at the moment the management is handled through a lot of files, which I actually got from one of the contents guys. They released this a long time ago, so they'd actually written a lot of the OAuth1 stuff, which was incredibly confusing. I had to update it. Some of this includes a little bit of custom code to actually get it to work with Twitter, but ideally I want to drop all of this, get rid of all of these, because they just clog it up. And OAuth2 should really be such a simple, easy process, which is why they refined it from OAuth1. But the downside with OAuth2 is that although it has a spec and it went through a lot of working drafts and implementations, the spec is still loose. So there's enough skeleton there to make 95% of things consistent between providers, but there's enough leeway there for them to customize it and tailor it, which is fine, you'd kind of expect, but it's that 5% which can actually throw it off and almost make it unusable, really. So it would be nice to see that folder gone and a true OAuth2 implementation in place. So when we actually set the auth details, I need to write, this is where I might have, so set auth details. Okay, so that's when we're going to send that information through. I will get back to required string OAuth token, and by default we're setting that as well. OAuth token secret. So already by creating a struct and dropping the auth details component, we've streamlined the code, which is nice. And finally we want the user account name. There we go, nicely aligned. The one thing I love about VS Code is the fact that you can align things like your equal signs, and even when it comes to writing script syntax for structs, you can align the colons, and it's all very customizable. But I love that about the extension in VS Code. And VS Code for me has been an incredible editor. I used to be a very heavy user of Cold Fusion Builder, but for me it was just too slow. And then they started, unfortunately, adding in a lot of the phone gap stuff and the CF client things, which kind of bogged it down and made it too unwieldy. So I switched to Sublime, which was great. VS Code freaked me out at first when I first started playing with it. But then to make it easier, there was actually an extension out there that had Sublime text key maps. So I was so used to just using the keyboard mappings to navigate around and do things that I didn't want to learn the VS Code ones, and I didn't really want to have to go and map everything. There was an extension that did all of that for me, which was fantastic. So that was very nice and made the transition a lot easier. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy that over, because we're essentially adding in, and keep that aligned as well, we're adding in the same values. And this is where the anal part of me again wants to tidy up this, because those spaces were probably added in with horrendous tabs and or space marks, spacing on the keyboard, instead of properly formatted indentations. So although it might look pretty in the editor over here, on the right hand side, when it actually comes to the repository, it looks like something horrendous. So at least that way that's been split out as well. Okay, so we have the set auth details. And the set auth details is actually taking a struct. I've just realized, so that needs to be changed. Which means these now need to be name value pairs and not unnamed assignments. So there are some other amazing live stream developers out there as well. Well, I say other amazing. I'm not saying I'm amazing. That sounds really ridiculous. There are some amazing live stream developers out there as well. So it's something that I'd really like to see take off. Dan Vega from the Cold Fusion community. Anyone knows Dan? He's been around for a long, long time. He's very, very heavy on that as well. So I would go and I'd certainly recommend checking out his site, danvega.com. I believe he's just updated it and changed the domain name, so he's there too. Definitely check him out. But you can find guys on, you can find live stream developers on Twitch and YouTube. I need to stop saying guys. That's a horrendous habit. I'm so sorry. That is not inclusive of the audience or the community. And I'm very, very wary of that, so please accept my apologies. Okay, so set auth details. Let's go for another little describe down here. I should have written this. See, already I've ended up kind of starting writing test cases after I've written the method, kind of. So, and that's not the way it should be done. Method calls. So it's quite surprising, actually, or not, given how much I waffle on, that it's been about 40 minutes already so far, and we haven't actually got that far into it. But in a way, for me, it's been interesting and cathartic, so that's nice. But it's certainly not going to be a quick process. But don't worry, I'm probably not going to stream everything keystroke for keystroke in the next 500 episodes of the ongoing saga of monkehTweet's refactor. I might just pull in from time to time to show where I am updated. At the end of the day, it's a live stream, it's me coding, and there might be something that people find interesting, or it might just be relaxing for me to discuss. We shall see. It should add the correct struct properties when calling the set auth details method. Nope. Can't expect anything until I've got a result. Variables dot. Okay, so I would like my consumer key in honor of Scott. You're my consumer key, Scott. Consumer secret. Strohs. So ideally what we want to do is to make sure that these properties are persisted and added to the struct. And user account name. Monkeh. Because that's how you pronounce it. Monkeh. So expect actually, although we're not, that's not actually going to return anything, that's just going to be the property. And what I want to do is actually check that when I call that property, I'm going to have a struct. Get all the details. Wowzers. Okay. So expect result to be struct, to have key, So we want it to have all of these things in place, and then we can even check that the values going in are the values that we actually get when we call out, when we request it back, and not the default empty string values. So OAuth token secret. By the way, if you haven't already, and I'm sure a lot of, if there are any CFML developers watching this, I'm sure you're all aware already, but if you haven't tuned in or subscribed to the Modernise or Die podcast from the Auto Solutions team, then I highly recommend it. I've known they've been doing it for quite a while. I only tuned in for the first time last week, which I'm incredibly ashamed to say. And I was blown away with it. The production was incredible. I knew they were live streaming on YouTube, but I love the setup of it. So you've got Gavin and either Andrew or Brad or a guest presenter or a guest speaker, but they're sat there kind of green screened behind like a news desk. It's just fantastic. The content is brilliant. There's a very, very clear structure to it every week, but it's very, very good. And they have the audio version as well, so you can just get it from all of your normal podcast stores. They also have the Soapbox edition as well, which I haven't listened to yet, and I'm very, very sorry, but I know that has a lot of guest speakers and kind of drills in more for interviews, I believe. But I would certainly highly recommend subscribing to the Modernise or Die podcast. So I will do the value checks on that afterwards, but I'm going to run that. And I'm sure I've missed something. Yes, I have. Should have the correct struct property. Well, I can't spell. Okay, cool. And what we can do then, just to make sure, check the values. So expect result dot consumer key, spelt correctly, please. Thank you very much. To be string and to be Scott. There you go, Scott. If you're still tuned in, then you get your name mentioned again, you unlucky, unfortunate individual. So I'm not going to name all of them right now, but we're still getting green and we are getting the values back. But I mean, one good thing already, if we compare this to the old, we've dropped this, that's gone, we've dropped a model already. I'm also going to want the ability within here to, actually the user account name, that was not required, was it? monkehTweets also allowed users to be able to set whether or not they wanted their results passed as a JSON string returned, or whether they wanted it as a CFML struct. They could do that from the actual object level when they go to construct it here using the init, or they're actually able to override it when they come down to various methods. So. But I mean, already in a short space of time, I could have probably typed a bit quicker and with a bit more higher level of accuracy, were I not wittering away. But it's streamlining. It is streamlining already, which is nice. So we can finish off. I want to finish off this constructor method. So it's required by false. The default is false. And of course, I will add the method values, the arguments values up there when we go to. And I also have a string for timeout. And the default is 30. Okie dokes. Consumer key. I'll add these values in at a later point. Consumer secrets. But if you're writing stuff, then always make sure that you comment, because if it's not for someone else to figure out what needs to go in, I guarantee it will be for you to figure out what needs to go in when you actually look at it in 5 years' time and realise that you can't remember half of the things that you actually added in and why you added them in. So pass result, and I'll add the actual hints in for that later on. Timeout. Okay. At the moment, I mean, this does extend a base class, which I'm going to look at a bit later on. I'm going to figure out what I actually want to do with that one when the time comes. The set pass results, yeah, we'll add that in. So that's a boolean, not a boolean, a boolean. And hopefully the keyboard isn't going too crazy and it's not too noisy on the microphone. So pass results, pass results. That should actually be there. And that's now, so pass results, that's now an implicit, so we can manage that one. That's another one gone. And timeout as well. Okay, so I mean, we're getting there. We are getting there. When it comes down to actually adding in the functional calls to the API to make the requests, that's going to be a lot easier. The hardest thing, or the thing I was most concerned about, was the bare bones, the actual functionality, the underlying functionality of the wrapper itself that actually manages everything, and making sure that when I strip that out, I don't end up breaking anything. So it's going to be an experience. It's going to be a fun experience. I think, I hope. It would be nice to say it's going to be a fun experience. I think I'm going to leave that there for the moment. I'm going to commit that up. Well, not commit it. I'm going to commit it locally. I'm not going to push anything up until we've done a bit more on this. But we shall see. But thank you very much for bearing with me. If you have stuck in and listened to the inane drivel, then it has been much appreciated. There will be regular streams going up for cathartic, mindful approaches to development. Hopefully it's been of use to you. I think it's been of use to me. I've certainly enjoyed it. And if you would like to find out when things are going to be streaming and when things are going to be happening, then we're streaming on youtube.com/coldfoodmonkey and twitch.tv/coldfoodmonkey. So if you want to follow or subscribe to either one of those channels, then you'll get a notification should you wish to be informed when the stream goes live. I will also be just posting on Twitter as well, just to let people know. And if you would like to indulge myself and to indulge yourself and allow me to share some of your time in your company, then that would be very much appreciated. So until next time, my name's been Matt Gifford, aka Coldfood Monkey. I would like to thank you very, very much for watching the stream, for being a part of the first official stream. And until next time, I look forward to it, and you have yourself a lovely evening. Thank you very much.